This is Krusty the Bear. Krusty the Bear doesn't respect the rails. Now he's dead and forgotten. Look at how sad Krusty is. Don't be a Krusty. Respect the rails.
Vem maga lenha, rojão, traz a lenha pro fogão, vem fazer armação. Hoje é dia de sol, alegria de coió, é curtir o verão.
Vem maga lenha, rojão, traz a lenha pro fogão, vem fazer armação. Hoje é dia de sol, alegria de coió, é curtir o verão.
In the beginning, there was darkness, and out of that darkness came light. It illuminated an iron road which stretched infinitely off into the distance. And with that light came a chance to explore the vast expanses of time and space. Like a moth to a flame, I was drawn to it. Looking down those tracks, I needed to know what lay beyond the bend, so I hitched a ride. Only no matter how far I rode, there was always one more bend just up ahead. Just a bit further, I thought, but deep down I knew I was destined to ride this line to the end. As you stand there watching the light from my train disappear around the corner, leaving you once again in darkness, let it be known, one more soul has been lost to the rails. For it is here that our feet never touch the ground and our souls never rest. There is no coming back. I shall continue to ride on long after the light goes out for me in this world, for here we roll infinite. Although it was my parents' and grandparents' generation who knew poverty best, their hard work and dedication rose us up above the ashes and created options for me which they didn't have as children. Nonetheless, the iron road called to me from as far back as I can remember. It was never even a question. So what is it about the open road which leads so many astray? For the men of old, it was in search of opportunity and a better life. But while some rolled towards it, others were rolling away. Regardless of their reasons, in the end, they've all gone to dust.
When I first come to Hope on, I took a freight train to be my friend. Hold on.
I've always dreamt on these hobos of old. Since day one, their ghosts called to me. And even though most are now gone, I will forever admire and honor their spirit.
You know a hobo. Hobo a long, long way from home. Oh yeah.
But in today's age, what are we searching for? And if we're going to dust in the end as well, what's the point?
Yes, I'm here. Long time ago.
Either way, as much as I'd like to revel in times past, those were the old days. And things have changed. With Voyager 1 recently leaving our solar system and venturing out into the vast expanses of deep space, it was a reminder that we weren't designed to go in circles for eternity, but instead to branch out into the unknown. As a train hopper, it seemed like North America was the limit to my existence. But like Voyager 1, I wasn't created to stick around. So when the chance came to head down to Brazil to visit Mac, it was only fitting that I take up the call to ride on. Was I going to be able to pull it off? There was only one way to find out. It's now mid-May, and once again, I'm rolling my way into the Canadian wilderness. Despite growing up here, I'd spent years riding through most of Ontario, but never really stopping to explore a lot of the places it had to offer. So, this trip was about getting to know home a bit better. The snow had long since been replaced by mosquitoes, and for the time being, it seemed like a great trade-off. Being able to have a smaller pack and wear shorts is about as good as it gets. To be honest, I don't even bring a sleeping bag with me for the summer months. But this past winter, I didn't have to worry too much about the cold, as I was much closer to the equator. Watching the sunset as the countryside rolls by me, it's hard to believe it's already been 6 months since we were in Brazil. To be honest, it's hard to believe I even went there in the first place. Now, I have a severe wanderlust, but I'd never really heard much about Brazil other than its high crime rates and beaches. Two things I wasn't really into, so it was never really high on my list. It certainly didn't help that some of the websites which I frequent, such as Best Gore or Documenting Reality, seem to get daily footage of fucked up shit that came out of Brazil. Crazier still, half the time the cops just stand by and watch. More than any other country, Brazil seemed lawless. And although I like that to a certain point, this isn't what I consider a good time. The crazy thing is, these are the good guys. So what the fuck are the bad guys like? And what if they look poorly at train hoppers? I had visions of getting lynched like this at the hands of angry rail fans. Bandita had always wanted to go there, as she clearly wasn't watching what I was. So, if she went, it probably wasn't going to be with me. Although, the thought of her being there alone didn't suit me too well either. Even with our buddy Mac living down there, I still had a million other places I wanted to go to first before Brazil. That was until Mac posted some photos he had taken around the country. They were incredible. Brazil was everything you would think, and Mac's photos were nothing short of perfection. Lush jungles, massive beaches, and beautiful girls. I won't lie, his pictures and write-ups changed the way I saw the country. However, it still wasn't enough to entice me over to the dark side. Then I came across this picture. Bam! It was like a light turned on, and all of a sudden every bad thing about the country seemed to fade away. Maybe I could overlook some of our differences. My brain was on fire, and I shit you not, within a day, we began to plan our trip to Rio to meet up with Mac. Thoughts of all the things that could go wrong filled my head, but as scary as it all was, it drew me in at the same time. Luckily for us, it turned out to be a busy summer work-wise, which was just what I needed to fund an expedition into the Brazilian jungle on the back of a freight. Through total luck and a little help from Bandita, I managed to get work as a daily grip on a shitty TV movie a few years back. I just happened to be visiting her for lunch and someone on set was sick. With no one else available, the production took me on. I worked hard and managed to get called back for the next show. A few days' work turned into a career. Well, as much as you can have in this industry. That summer, I was offered work on 2 TV movies, a 6-part miniseries, and 2 feature films. On the series, I also got the chance to work with Dolly. Talk about stressful. This was all before the fall when we were planning on leaving, so it couldn't have worked out better. 12 to 16-hour days, split up by lunches with Bandita trackside, was my life for almost 6 months. It was a lot of work and the hours were insane, but even though I was too busy to go out riding, I still managed to play with tracks of a different type. Better still, you get fed all day on set, so I managed to save even more money, if not getting a little fat in the process. Add in all the free clothing you get on bigger shows, and it was a good summer. Whenever I wasn't slaving away on set, I used my free time to prepare for Brazil. That meant research. There definitely wasn't as much info online about freights in Brazil as one would have hoped, but old Wise Hop knows how to get to the bottom of things. I used all the usual tools and then a few new ones. Brazilian rail fans were more than happy to talk about their trains, and it didn't take long to get to the bottom of everything. I searched for routes that had terrain I had yet to ride through, and after a bit more research, I hit the jackpot. By fall, we had easily saved up enough for the trip, and I even had cash left over to buy a computer and an editing program, which I made this with. The next thing I knew, fall was upon us, and we were boarding a plane south to world-famous Rio de Janeiro. As a child, I remember going to museums and getting lost in 3D dioramas. I'd always wondered what it would be like to step inside that world. Alone in a painted land void of life, where even the animals were frozen in time. I imagined walking beyond the horizon, as if it stretched beyond the artist's work. It was as if God designed the universe and then us in order to explore it. Or maybe we're the artists exploring our own creation. Like the museums, I've seen most of Ontario from behind the glass, so to speak. Like a passenger in a car, I was confined to the iron road. But this trip was about stepping into that painting. For me, this world isn't merely for the watching. I grabbed a few Z's on my northbound, and by sunrise I was at my first destination. For years I had always thought about stopping here, and I was excited to see what lay beyond the tracks. It was absolutely pristine here. The air was fresh with morning dew. I was surrounded by lush green forests and rock-lined lakes. I couldn't wait to find a spot to set up camp and start working on a fire. This was gonna be amazing. Of course, being in the north, there was the odd mosquito. But I grew up in Lanark County, which is basically swamp, so they weren't anything new to me. After a few hard days on the road, I was due for a bath, and since I was out in the middle of nowhere, why not a wee skinny dip in the lake? Boy, did it feel good to strip down. It never seems to amaze me how fucking fluorescent my white ass can be. I had visions of a crew rolling down the tracks and coming across me alone, filming myself naked. That would have been awkward. All I could hope for now was that some fish didn't mistake my little dick for food. The birds watched in wonder over this neon creature which now lurked among them. There was also a beaver in the lake, and I only hoped we didn't run into each other amongst the black water. By the time I came out of the lake, the sun had risen a bit more, and along with it came swarms of mosquitoes. Standing there naked, I was covered from head to toe. I decided to pass on the campfire and instead use my stove, as the thought of collecting wood with all these mosquitoes didn't seem too appealing.
God damn it.
They swarmed all over me, and worst of all, my face. They were going in my eyes. Whenever I inhaled, they would go in my mouth, and I constantly had to clean them out of my ears. This wilderness paradise was quickly turning into a nightmare, and I hadn't even been here for more than 30 minutes yet.
Oh, fuck.
Sometimes all you want is a coffee and a smoke in the morning. Usually it's a pretty easy request. Today, however, it was almost impossible. Never had I seen such thick swarms of mosquitoes in my life.
It's fucking insane. Insane. My fucking mind.
Rolling my morning smoke was even worse. By now I was almost completely debilitated.
Fuck. This is insane.
Concentrating on anything but mosquitoes for more than 5 seconds was proving to be a real challenge.
This is fucking insane. I am going to lose my mind.
I was on the verge of going mental.
I lost it already. Thank God there's no fucking malaria up here, man, because I'd have it in about 10 seconds. Fucking mosquitoes are insane. Oh my God.
All I could do to keep them at bay was to keep moving.
Now there's mosquitoes in this coffee, and I don't give a shit. I'm gonna eat these motherfuckers. Fuck! I'd plan on staying here for a night or two, soaking up the beautiful scenery, swim, camp, but these mosquitoes are fucking insane. So I'm getting out of here today. Plain and simple. Get the fuck out of my face.
Everybody was kung fu fighting.
Bullshit. Now, I know it seems kind of funny to see a train hopper brushing his teeth,
Fucking losing my mind.
but the truth is my poor dental health over the years has caught up to me. I'll spare you the visuals. That being said, the only thing I hate more than the dentist is these mosquitoes. So after cleaning up, it was time to hightail it the fuck out of here. This was not the warm welcome home I was hoping to have. Maybe the next place would be more hospitable. Nature 1, Wise Hop 0. Do you ever stare at the night sky and think about the vast expanses of space? Have you ever marveled at the Milky Way? On a clear night, you can see about 2,500 stars. Almost all of them are less than 1,000 light years away from us. Our whole galaxy is about 100,000 light years across. Everything you see looking in the night sky is only the brightest stars within this red circle. There are roughly 100 to 400 billion stars in our galaxy alone. For every star, there is an equal number of galaxies in the observable universe. In all that, everything that has ever been done, anyone who has ever existed, was here. How irrelevant we are. With Voyager 1 traveling at a speed of 325 million miles per year, if it were heading towards our nearest star, Alpha Centauri, it would take tens of thousands of years. Luckily, Rio was only a 10-hour flight for me. I had butterflies in my stomach as our plane touched down in Rio. It was finally here. The culmination of all my hopes and fears waited for me just up ahead. Mac was already there waiting for us as we exited the airport. I met Mac a few years earlier while he was attending university in Montreal.
Oh, he's got the camera out.
We were both mental for trains and had an equally unhealthy need for adventure. On the same night we met, I took him on his first train hop, and it's been a love affair ever since. While in school, Mac took the opportunity to learn Portuguese, so it only followed that once he was finished, he'd head down south to live in Brazil for a while.
We don't run into any railroad crossings.
As well as hitting up the waves and beautiful girls, he also took the time to work on his photography, which, well, got me down here. From the world-famous beaches to the equally famous favelas, pretty much anything you know about Brazil can be summed up here in sunny Rio de Janeiro. Our first few nights were spent in Copacabana. Now a bustling middle-class neighborhood, it was once the rich part of the city. But after a tunnel was created connecting it with Botafogo and the rest of the city, the rich moved further down the shorelines to Ipanema. Again, as the city grew, they kept moving further south away from the rank and file. First to LeBlanc, then on to Barra de Juca, always trying to stay one step ahead of the masses. Copacabana was perfect for our intro to the city. The streets were full of life, the corners were all lined with juice bars, which was a huge part of the culture, and we definitely took advantage of them. Every morning we'd get up for a coffee and a salgado, which are basically little pastries with meat, cheese, and other goodness. This was all before enjoying a Brazilian favorite in a acai berry smoothie. I couldn't get enough of those smoothies, but as good as they were, they killed my teeth afterwards. Brazilian diets were pretty hearty, with a lot of meat, potatoes, rice, and beans. After our first week in Rio, I had already eaten my fair share of fila de frango. One item, which seemed popular, was cheese and banana sandwiches. I did actually want to try one, but unfortunately, never took the opportunity. We did, however, try chicken hearts for the first time while visiting a family Mac was living with. Tasted pretty good, actually, but we had a hard time getting over the whole heart part of it, so we didn't eat too many. That being said, it was still much better than the tarantula I tried in Cambodia a few years back.
Eating tarantulas is a delicacy. Eat the whole body.
Nights were spent on Arpador Rock, which overlooked Ipanema Beach. It was a popular drinking spot for the locals and was also a big draw for tourists during sunsets behind Vidigal, which I might add are pretty amazing if you get the chance. Sitting there, I couldn't help but think about what life must be like for the people of these world-famous slums. Meanwhile, the bustling nightlife of Ipanema and LeBlanc strolls along with its usual opulence. Such extremes so closely tied together. Thinking about how many people truly are forgotten by their society here really made me put things back home into perspective. I've been to a lot of places around the world where rich and poor live closely together, but Rio is in a league of its own. To think that being born a few hundred feet from one place could add up to such a drastic difference in the life one may have. I guess the big question in all this is who's responsible for these conditions? Or even, does it matter? The answer depends on your vantage point. As I sat there, I marveled over all the lights powered by stolen electricity and wondered what the living conditions must be like in those hills. Meanwhile, despite the drastic divide between rich and poor here, on the beach, we are all reduced to our basic essences as human beings. Rio, like most of Brazil, is a place of sharp contrast. The divisions between rich and poor here are quite apparent. The favelas are easily visible from pretty much anywhere and are a testament to the sheer amount of people forgotten by the system. These favelas situated up on the hillsides have amazing views, and the wealthy are getting wise to it. With the World Cup and Summer Games taking place, the elite have done much to clean up and pacify a lot of the once violent favelas under the guise that it's to make Rio safer for these games. The reality is they're actually pushing out the poor so the wealthy can start moving in. And what better excuse than world events? This hasn't been more apparent than in Vidigal, which overlooks Ipanema Beach. Once an avoided slum, now a hotspot for tourists and rich alike. On top of the pacification of these neighborhoods, the poor as usual are being exploited. There are now tours offered in which you can go and watch marginalized people from the comfort of your bus. Even crazier still, I've heard you can actually pay to get robbed in a favela for the ultimate experience. How fucked is that? Since when was someone's poverty considered a tourist attraction? The threat of violence and crime here is ever present, and even in the nicer parts of the city, everything is gated to the hilt. Everywhere we went, we were constantly warned by the locals. It was a strange feeling to be walking along such nice areas, yet always feel like you could get robbed at any second. It's hard to not have that get to you after a while, as I kid you not, it was day in and day out. If we're not even safe in popular family spots, how are we going to fare off the beaten track? This only added to my earlier worries about violence in the country. Here, anything can happen at any moment, so you always kind of had to be ready. You're not even safe on the beaches. Of course, how could I forget the beach? Although this isn't really my style, the beaches here were pretty epic. It's easy to see why this city revolves around the ocean when this is what you get to wake up to every day. Poor and rich alike come here to soak up the sun, which I'm surprised isn't on the national flag. It's funny because here the locals tend to think of people from Sao Paulo as being uptight and working too hard, whereas people from Sao Paulo say people in Rio are lazy and too laid back. But walking around here, I can't help but relax. So that's exactly what we did. During one of our lazy days on the beach, we found out the film work we were both counting on back home didn't get greenlit. That meant no work for us, which, well, we were counting on to help recoup from this trip. So, due to lack of funds, our trip was now going to be cut in half. That meant I was only going to get a chance to ride one of the 2 lines I was hoping to ride. And worse still, I wouldn't be able to ride it as long as I would have liked. The lack of funds and time made the decision easy. The line in the north of Brazil meant we would have to fly to São Luís, which was extra dough, whereas the line out of Santos was only a cheap 8-hour bus ride away. So as much as we were enjoying Rio, it was time to make our way south to Praia Grande to prepare for our jungle ride. The pressure was now on as my window to ride began to close. I worried now if I'd even be able to pull it off. What we think about time is nothing more than an illusion. Even though experiencing the passage of time is a fundamental part of our lives, time doesn't actually flow at all. It turns out the perception of time changes from person to person, and time itself can actually speed up or slow down. Common sense dictates that we all agree on what's happening now, moment to moment. However, it turns out that there's a link between motion through space and the passage of time. So when you take motion into account, our common sense notion of time goes out the window completely. Think of it like film. Every moment in time from the Big Bang to the end of the universe is like a series of snapshots. Only how we pass through them can actually differ from one individual to another. It sounds crazy, but the effect is real and it can be measured. Back in 1971, scientists took 2 atomic clocks. Leaving one on the ground, they then flew the second clock around the world. Comparing them upon return, the 2 clocks no longer matched. It was very real proof of the impact motion has on the passage of time. This led Einstein to realize that the sharp contrast we see between past, present, and future is only an illusion. As you move, your perception of what now is changes relative to others. At the slow speeds we move here on Earth, the effects on time are so minute we don't notice. But over a vast distance, that changes. Let's say there's someone 1 billion light years away from us. If you're both sitting still, not moving in relation to each other, then your perception slice of time is the same. But if they are moving away from you, it changes the angle of the now slice. So their now would no longer be your now, but could instead be when the dinosaurs roamed. And if that's not strange enough, if they move towards you, the angle then changes towards the future. Gravity also affects the passage of time in the same manner. When you move further away from a source of gravity, time speeds up. That's why clocks on GPS satellites tick at a different rate than the clocks here on the Earth's surface. So they need to be adjusted. So anything that has ever happened or will happen all exists simultaneously. There is nothing in physics that picks out one now over any other now. Like a film projector, it's just from our subjective viewpoints that things feel like they're actually changing. So maybe we are all frozen in time, just like those animals at the museum. How fucked is that? Thinking back to my worries about what the bugs would be like down there in the jungles of Brazil made me laugh, especially after what I'd been through over the past hour or so here in the north. The walk to town took about 30 minutes, and seeing as the yard was looking pretty dead, I decided to go grab some supplies. It'd give me a chance to kill some time, as well as get a break from these flying insanity machines. This town has a population of about 25, so the corner store was also a liquor store and a restaurant, all wrapped up in one. Walking in, the owner asked if I wanted a coffee. I said sure, and a pint of blood please. The locals laughed and the owner ended up buying me breakfast. Thanks, man. Rejuvenated, I made my way back out in hopes a train would come soon. My new spot was even worse than before, as now I was fighting mosquitoes and black flies. I just can't win. I did, however, find evidence left behind from hobos of old. I just fucking hope these weren't the bones of a past rider who was eaten alive by bugs while waiting on a train. I spent the next 19 hours watching workers roll by and losing my fucking mind. I tried drinking a bit to relieve the insanity, but it only made things worse. Even though I had no idea it was going to be like this, I really do seem to search this shit out subconsciously. If I'm not on the verge of death due to the elements, I'm battling my insanity. As the sun set, more wildlife came out to keep me company. My train finally came around midnight, and I can't tell you how good it felt. As we departed, I rolled a celebratory smoke and basked in my new bug-free home. It was a cold-ass night, but I slept like a baby, despite the sounds of mosquitoes and black flies still ringing through my head. By sunup, we were winding our way through the lake-covered wilderness I've come to love so dearly. But best of all, the breeze kept any potential bugs off me. Despite working my way north, the many lakes brought with them the odd cottage, which I still needed to be vigilant of. When things were clear though, the consist of my ride made it possible for me to take on a new level of comfort and a better view. A few hours after sunrise, the rain took over. Luckily, the ride behind me had a bit of a roof. Despite it being suicide, it would at least keep me dry. The rain didn't last very long anyhow, and by the time I was done my smoke, the sun once again blessed my presence. Before I knew it, we were making our way up into the hills. This is by far some of the nicest stretch of railroad this province has to offer. And I hate to admit it, but for the many times I've been through here over the past 10 years, this will be the first time I've done it awake for the whole thing. The scenery did not disappoint, and it was one breathtaking scene after the other. To give you an idea how big my train was, I was about 1.5 to 2 miles back, and the shoreline was giving up views like this. Crazier still, I couldn't even catch the ass end of this train from the other side. What a sexy beast. As I watched the scenery drift by, I could hear the hobos of old calling out. I wondered how many have rolled through here since this line was forged out of the rocks back in the late 1800s. My mind wandered amongst all the lost souls who had graced this sub over the centuries, their presence on this earth already wiped clean as if they never existed. one day I too will be forgotten in the same manner, as will you. It blows my mind to think how many people have lived on this earth which are now forgotten by the sands of time. I'm sure they felt the exact same way about their life then as you do about yours now. But like the distant galaxies out in deep space, even as you watch this video, these moments are already gone. But no matter how hard you think about it, it's impossible to imagine not existing. Or anything else in your life for that matter. But it's coming, and it's coming fast. Our lives revolve around cycles. We use these cycles to help mark the illusion of time. The Earth spins on axis every 24 hours, which we call a day. We orbit the Sun every 365.2 days, which we call a year. Saturn takes 29.5 years to make one rotation around the Sun. Imagine what a birthday would mean when you only had 3 in a lifetime. But what if we go even bigger? How long do you think it takes for the Sun to complete a rotation around the center of our galaxy? The answer? 226 million years, also known as a galactic year. How strong a force must be in order to hold hundreds of billions of stars, even more planets, moons, and God knows what else in its grasp. But here's the thing. Contrary to popular belief, we aren't actually going in circles, but instead spiraling through space. It means the cycle of life isn't actually a cycle at all. So even though it always seems like we come back to the same places we began, on this voyage through the cosmos, we're never actually in the same place twice. It's a pattern repeated throughout, and it's all governed by our majesty gravity. But gravity does a lot more than just hold things together, or bend time. It binds us, and draws our reality in. Despite some of the universe's strongest gravitational objects, I have a feeling ours is the strongest of all. We have a lot more control over the things that come to us in this life than we like to admit. And once we accept this simple truth and stop blaming external forces for the things that happen to us, the closer to true personal freedom we come. But then again, if everything past, present, and future is all existing at once, I guess we're already there. Our target was a small yard owned and operated by America Latina Logistica, which was located about 10 kilometers northwest of a beach city called Praia Grande. Situated just south of Sao Paulo, the city was a popular weekend getaway for locals. Looking over photos online, it was easy to see why. While the city was lined by miles of beach and ocean, the yard on the other hand was situated further inland next to jungle-draped hills and winding rivers. It seemed like this place had it all. From the yard, the line worked its way up into the mountains, crossing waterfalls and rolling through countless tunnels. If I'd done my research, this was going to be an epic ride. Here's a breakdown on how the trains worked in the area, at least as far as I knew at this point. Basically, ships dock at the busy ports of nearby Santos where they pick up and drop off goods. As you can see by the line of ships waiting to get access, it's a busy place. A crew then takes the goods from the port and drops the train off in this little yard northwest of Praia Grande. From here, a road crew takes over, pulling the trains up into the mountains and on into Brazil. Trains bringing goods to be exported from inland come through this yard as well. Even cooler still, this was the main access point to the ports, and a couple different companies used the same line, so one technically had a wide range of choices on where to branch out from here. Since the yard was in the middle of nowhere, it seemed like the perfect spot. We could avoid the busy and probably secure ports of Santos, while enjoying relative wilderness away from prying eyes. Brazil was one of the world's top exporters of iron ore. With mines dotting the country, I was expecting to ride an iron train before anything else. Most of the other rides didn't seem too rideable anyhow, so I was hoping for a lot of iron trains. But that was all yet to be seen. I could be really wrong about everything, in which case this expedition may be bust. I could only hope that I did my research and this was all going to work out. To add to things, I wasn't going to be by myself. so my margin for error was quite a bit smaller. To be honest, I was nervous. Of course, getting to the bottom of everything was what the scout day was for. So before even thinking of riding a train out of there, I was gonna have to spend a day or two at the yard in order to get the lay of the land. Using Airbnb, I found an apartment right on the beach. Located about 10 kilometers from our target, it was a bit of a hike, but there was an abandoned line which one could basically follow right to the yard. The apartment was only $50 a night and it slept 6. With a washing machine, a kitchen, and a view like this, it was a perfect spot to charge up before heading out. The idea was to spend a few days soaking up the sun, then put in a day at the yard to get a feel for the situation. If all was good, ride out into the jungle a day or two later. Pretty straightforward. We arrived around 11 p.m. and after a bit of a kerfuffle with the dick of a security guard, we finally got into our apartment. Once in, we asked the building super where we could eat. He said everything was closed nearby, but we could order pizza. Okay, so we let him order his favorite kind, but he ends up ordering pizza with eggs and peas on it. Weirdest pizza I've had to date, and I can't say I'd recommend it. But here's the thing, when he orders the pizza, the company asks us for the exact bills we were going to be paying with. That way, they can give the delivery guy the exact change in case he gets robbed. What the fuck? This is supposed to be a nice oceanside beach town. People weren't even that sketched out in Haiti. And believe me, Haiti was fucking rough.
So can we show people our laundry room?
Yeah.
In this very exotic location, we have an extremely nice laundry line that's decorated by some chickens. There we go, all of our laundry.
The videos I'd watched about Brazil looped through my head every time someone mentioned the constant threat of violence here. It was really starting to get to me. Like I've said before, if the nice areas are already this bad, what's it going to be like when we roll into a ghetto? I had no idea what any of the places were like where these trains roll through, or may stop. But chances are, they were going to be more run down than a fucking beach town. The next day, while Bandita worked on her projects and Mac hit the waves, I decided to walk partway to the yard to get a feel for the area and maybe take a few photos. Of course, not even a block away, and the building super comes running out after me and tells me not to go out with my camera because I'll get shot and robbed. I told him it was my work, so I had no choice. It was the only excuse I had, which he finally accepted and left. But not 2 minutes later, and still in the same damn block, some homeowners came out and told me the same fucking thing. Now I was getting worried. The streets only got worse the further in from the beach I walked, and I won't lie, I even contemplated turning back. However, I reminded myself, if I can't even go 2 blocks on my own, how am I gonna head out into the real unknown? So, despite my fears, I walked on, the whole time ready to get made at any second. Whenever I'd stop to film or take a photo, I'd put my back up against a wall, the whole time expecting to get fucked by every person who passed. This town looked like a paradise online, but it sure was a sketchy as fuck place in person. People really lived in fear here, and it was really wearing off on me. Hearing about violence day in and day out was one thing, but on top of hearing about it, every single home was gated to the hilt. Barbed wire and fucking guard dogs. It crossed my mind that these people were not even keeping others out anymore, but instead, keeping themselves locked in. As much as I've roamed this globe, I've never seen people live in as much fear as here in Brazil. I thought back to all the debates about the media and wondered what role they played here. Were people's fear built up by the media, or was it real? Either way, at the end of the day, real or perceived, it didn't seem to matter, because the results were the same. Somebody was failing society here in a huge way. Soon after, I found the abandoned line. With the sun about to set, I decided to make my way back to the apartment to meet up with the crew. By the time I got back, Bandita was cooking up some fine Punjabi cuisine, which was a welcome break from the daily chicken, rice, beans, and potatoes. We hung out on the balcony, had a few beers with dinner, and watched Brazilian beach life in all its splendor.
I found this here.
What is it? What joint?
Could be drugs.
Who would put that there?
People before staying here.
You gonna throw it in the garbage?
I'm gonna go down to the police and return this. If I put it in the garbage, someone might find it. Smoking or something like that. Try to get a lighter.
We spent the next day relaxing, but all I could think about was the yard. I was stoked to finally get some serious train time in. After months of dreaming, it was finally here. My only concern at this point was that in order to get to the yard, we would have to walk by 3 favelas. It looked safe on the map, but I know how different things can actually be once on the ground. So, we just hoped we wouldn't run into any shady kids on the way. Here in the Canadian wilderness, other than the odd redneck, there isn't much to worry about. Except that is for the odd locals of the animal kind. I arrived by midday, and after watching a small General Manifest leave, I headed into town to grab a few supplies, also known as beer. I missed the beer store by less than 5 minutes, but I had enough whiskey to do me for the night. So with that, I was back heading out of town to look for a place to spend a few nights. On my way out, I passed the yard which used to always be full to the brim with rolling stock. Nowadays, like so many other yards I've been rolling through, it was reduced to a ghost town. It really has begun to feel like the glory days of riding were behind us. I walked for about an hour until I found a nice spot up on a hill overlooking the main line, which felt pretty good.
This is our camp spot for tonight. Right next to the tracks, so maybe we'll get a few trains while we're having a campfire and drinking some whiskey.
There didn't seem to be too many bugs either, which was all I could ask for at this point.
As you can see up here, we got a nice view down the line. Right now we are looking west. Over here we are looking east.
The next step was to collect as much wood as I could before nightfall. But first, the mosquitoes were picking up a wee bit and I decided to cover up. They were nowhere near as bad as the day before, but with night coming anyhow, it was a way to keep warm and guard what was ever left of my flesh.
Look at this, my shirt seems to have ripped at the elbow. Not too much left of it. Probably should just rip it off, but for some reason I'm holding on to that little bit of fabric that's still left, but seems like my boots aren't the only things that go the hard way.
Seeing as it was still a bit early to start burning a fire, I took 5. The sun was about to set, so it was late enough for a drink. And while I was at it, why not take a moment to enjoy a nice cigar? There are few things in life better than whiskey, cigars, and a campfire.
Fuck my fucking dick, bitch.
Well, okay, maybe a couple. And I guess if I had a bit of good company, that would have been nice too. But all that being said, it was fair to say I was content. Standing there, I thought back to the yard in Praia Grande and my fears over getting robbed and losing all my gear.
A few years earlier, actually the same trip down through Latin America that when I was with Mitch and I shit my pants. It was about a month later, and me, Mitch, and Max, we were in Panama. And as most of you know, at the time there was no roads. So we either had 2 choices. We could either take an airplane and fly, or we could rent a boat and sail. Obviously sailing was the cooler option, so we ended up making our way to Cologne, which is on the opposite side of Panama from Panama City, where we were told we'd be able to rent boats from. And man, it was an absolute fucking shithole. Like at that point in my life, it was by far the worst place I've ever been. It was kind of funny because on one side you got Panama City, which is full of money, still a bit rough, but there's a lot of money there. And then you go over to Cologne and it is absolutely a disaster. And anyways, we just finished renting a boat and we were leaving to go. We were going to sleep for the night. And we're walking, and all of a sudden, me and Mitch are arguing as we normally argue or whatever, and then all of a sudden this kid comes out behind the bush, fucking pulls up his shirt, pulls out a gun, points it right in my face. And obviously I'm like, okay, but he's got a gun, like what am I going to, you know, there's not really much I can do. So I start taking off my bag, but as I'm taking off my bag, I'm looking around and it's like such a shithole. Like my passport, all my cash, everything that I owned and needed to get around and get home was with me in that bag. So halfway through it, I decided, you know what, fuck that. I'll take my chances and see if I can get away with not getting shot. So I'm struggling with one guy. Meanwhile, the guy that had his gun in my face, he moves around towards Mitch and then over to Max. And I remember just thinking, like, as long as they don't shoot me in the spine, like, I'll get through it. I just didn't want to be fucking paralyzed, right?
Afterwards, they went to Max, who was happy to give them everything he had. He gladly gave them his backpack, and he even reached into his pockets and gave them everything in there. They were happy with what they got from Max, and as soon as it started, they were gone. Max was your typical tough-talking Yank who always had these big ideas for dangerous adventures we should undertake. Yet, the second we get tested, he crumples like a sheet of paper. Typical. Shortly afterwards, while Max was talking to the cops, me and Mitch would look at each other and be like, yeah, that was fucking amazing. And then whenever Max would look back at us, we'd hang our heads and look sad. The thing for me and Mitch was that before we left on that trip, we both said we needed to have guns pulled on us at least once. You know, for it to be a legit adventure. So inside, we were both pretty happy with the experience. However, a couple weeks later while in Colombia, I read in the paper about a couple from Quebec who were on a bus that got boarded and robbed at gunpoint. The guy said no, and they shot him in the face, killing him instantly. So you never know. As I stood there enjoying my cigar, I watched as the local wildlife came out to enjoy some of the grain which had been spilled on the tracks. It was like Fables of the Green Forest. We had birds, rabbits, and even chipmunks. We all just chilled trackside doing our own thing. I was happily spaced out, but then was brought back to earth when I thought I heard heavy breathing coming from the brush across the other side of the tracks.
Fucking bear.
Great. A bear. Round 2.
Oh, it's a little bear. This is where I tell you that black bears are more afraid of us than them, or vice versa, but I'll end up fucking eating my face off tonight. Oh, dude, why the fuck are you coming over to my side?
He took his time, but eventually made his way down to the grain where, as I expected, he began to chomp down. He didn't seem overly interested in me, which was nice. With the sun setting, thoughts of me sleeping with him roaming around entered my head. I've had to deal with a few animals in the pitch black of night in the past, and it's never fun, even if it turns out to be harmless. Which, since we're talking about foreign adventures and wild animals in the dark of the night, here's one from a few months ago.
This reminds me of when I was in Cambodia recently and we slept in the jungle. It's about 10 at night, pitch black. We've never been there. We pulled a tuk-tuk in, we crashed, and here I am worried about snakes and tarantulas because they're ground dwelling in Cambodia, and while we were sleeping on the ground. And I woke up to probably the scariest sound I've ever heard. It was pitch black, and here, you guys have a listen. Tell me if you can recognize this noise, because to this day, no one's been able to identify it.
What the fuck is that? I'm scared. What the fuck makes that noise?
Anyways, I may get mauled by a bear tonight, so if I don't talk to you again, it's been good. Ciao.
At least, for the time being, everyone seemed happy. Buddy did not give a fuck, and he just mowed down on the grain. I was at least glad he had something other than me to nibble on. So he ate and chilled, I drank and smoked, everyone was happy, except for maybe Mr. Chipmunk.
There's your new ad for Jim Beam Black, right there. The sun finally went down below the horizon, and it's starting to get dark now, so let's do it. Soon I'm going to be intoxicated, and I'm just going to pass out and probably waking up with my fucking limbs gnawed to shit.
Next thing I know, the bear all of a sudden gets up and runs off. I look over and notice that there's now a second bear making its way down the tracks. Only this bear was a little more business, and she didn't seem too interested in the grain.
Basically, a whole family of bears is starting to circle me. This guy came, scared the other one over towards where I am, and oh, for fuck's sakes.
It was starting to look like I may have to fight a bear tonight.
What the fuck?
This bear just seemed to keep making its way over to me inch by inch, but then she'd keep disappearing into the woods, then popping back out again randomly. With it getting even darker, I was getting a little worried.
I'm getting circled by fucking bears. Dude, if we're gonna have to fucking go at it, just get it over with.
The booze pretty much took any worry out of me, and before I knew it, I completely forgot about them. As the sun set, I was rambling with myself and totally forgetting about making a fire. Sitting on a pile of railway ties, I drifted off as the final bits of sunlight sunk behind the horizon. I was awoken by a sudden flash of lightning, and after a quick glance into the darkness, I could see a storm was definitely coming in the distance. Great. I just can't get a moment of peace. It was pretty cold out by now, and the idea of being cold and wet brought me down a few levels. With thoughts of all the times in the past I've been stuck in torrential downpours flowing through my head, it didn't take long to hatch a plan to ride out on the next train. Once again, my hopes of chilling for a few days in utter comfort and joy went down the drain. Maybe I'm not really meant to sit still and relax, as it seems that every time I do, something tells me to keep moving along. All I could hope for now was that I could get out of here on a dry ride before the torrential downpour hit. So I curled up under a pine tree for shelter, went to sleep, and waited for my salvation. After getting awoken by 2 trains heading the other way, my ride finally rolled in around 4 a.m. Beelining it for a DPU, I wished the Berenstain Bears a good night, and moments later, I was asleep and warm in one of my favorite places on earth. The sun was shining bright with not a cloud in the sky the day we left on our scouting mission. With a 10K hike ahead of us, both myself and Mac were feeling the heat. Other than running into some random cows along the way, walking the abandoned length of track went as expected. We made it by the favelas without incident, and as we turned off the main highway, my excitement grew. So far, everything looked just as I had thought it would, which is always nice.
Watch from here. Watch me get robbed or not.
After crossing onto the highway, we said goodbye to the outside world and began our descent into the jungle. Walking the final stretch of tracks which would lead us to the Trevo yard, I was excited yet nervous for what I might find. Before we knew it, we reached the Rio Branco crossing which bordered the railroad's property. It was unsure territory beyond this bridge. All we had to do now was cross the river and we'd be at the...
Oh wow.
The scenery was spectacular, and as I took in my surroundings, the last memories of the outside world faded away. There was a breeze coming in off the water which gave us a much needed break from the tropical heat we'd been suffering through earlier. This was everything I could have imagined it to be. At the same time we hit the bridge, a bunch of kids from a nearby favela came to have a quick jump in the river. I guess this was a perfect time to take 5 and get a feel for the area, so we chilled with them for a bit. Mac, the cliff diver he is, couldn't turn down a chance to give her a shot as well.
How was it?
With trains working just off in the distance, I had a hard time containing myself. Inside, I just wanted to get to the yard. But this experience was kind of cool too. They invited us to head over to a waterfall down the road where they apparently had a sweet swimming spot. And although Mac was somewhat keen on swimming a bit more, my heart was set on freights. So after exchanging numbers with a few of the kids, we took the final step towards our hopeful catch-out spot. The yard was lined by rusted rolling stock and dilapidated shanty homes. As we walked by, we joked about how nice it would be to buy one as a home base for catching out. Despite there being a bit more civilization around the yard than I'd hoped, it seemed like a really laid-back area so far. Words can't describe my excitement rounding that corner. Despite there being crew hanging out, none of them seemed to care too much about our presence. From the busted up trains to the jungle draped hills in the background, this place was even better than I expected. So far, so good. The idea now was to head down to the other end of the yard where the ass end of a northbound train would be, in order to check out our chances. As we walked past one of the buildings, a worker came out and had a conversation with Mac. I was worried this may be it, and we may get booted before we even had any time to check things out. If that was the case, then catching out of here was going to be a fuck of a lot tougher than I'd expected. Mac worked his magic, and before long the worker gave us the 4-in-1 on how the yard works. One of the most important positions you can have on your crew is that of the diplomat. They're the people who are great at chatting up anyone and can talk their way out of anything. A lot of hardships can be avoided with the right words, and these people are worth their weight in gold. To be honest, I'm an antisocial, cranky fuck half the time, so I need people like Bandita and Mac to keep me breathing and out of jail.
It's really starting to piss me off.
In India, Bandita spoke 3 of the main languages, so we were able to chat up workers for info and even talk our way out of shit when it hit the fan.
I tell him we saw someone riding on the couplers.
हमने किसी को देखा था जो ट्रेन वहाँ से गई दूसरी साइड पे कोई बैठा था वहाँ पे
ऐसा कोई फालतू आदमी बैठ जाता है जिसको जान नहीं पा रही है वो बैठ सकता है ना.
He's like sometimes the odd person will sit there if they don't love their life. Sometimes they sit there.
Here, Max spoke Portuguese, which again came in handy. But speaking the language is one thing, making friends on the other hand is a whole other skill on its own. This was especially true today when we got a really good break thanks to Mac. It turns out the local gangs tend to hang out right where our catch-out spot was. It was also the same spot where those kids invited us to. Later we wondered if the swimming invite was a setup or if the kids were genuine. Either way, we were glad we didn't go.
It's rough past that trail there.
Yeah.
He's lived here for 23 years.
Yeah.
Que eu sinto dizer pra
he wants to help the
vocês
security of us because it's pretty bad back there.
que eles passam olhando uma vez, ó. Passam olhando uma vez, aí na volta eles vêm armados.
Agora?
É, entendeu? Para a segurança de vocês, era bom que vocês viessem com alguém conhecido aqui, entendeu? Eles passam, eles olham. Aí depois eles vão lá na favela, comunidade próximo e voltam, entendeu? E vocês podem perder o equipamento de vocês.
He just said watch them because they'll go now and get their guns and come back.
Oh really? All right.
Turns out this guy lived just down the road and he'd been living here for 23 years, so he knew how shit went down. The funny thing in all this is he knows most of them, and he says even if they stole our shit, he could get it back for us. I wasn't really down for that game though, so I was glad he gave us a heads up. He then went on to say we weren't safe around here, but would be safe in the yard. He even goes on to give us permission to tour the yard as we see fit. Taking it one step further, he also offers to drive us out of there in an hour when his shift was done to keep us from getting robbed. Talk about a huge score, if not a little unsettling. Not only did Mac just score us carte blanche to go anywhere we wanted, but I also wasn't going to get killed or lose my shit. What more can a man ask for, really? With all the crew seeing us around the yard today, we also figured that when we actually came back to catch out, they wouldn't think twice about our presence. Before setting us free, he gave us a quick tour of the facilities. We saw where they put sand in the units, how they clean the water table from all the oil runoff, and he also taught us a bit about the suspension on rolling stock. This was surreal. As nice as the yard was, we needed to head into the hills so we could watch trains come and go and find our catch-out spot. On the way, we passed a train which was in the middle of a crew change, so we took a minute to see how it all went down.
He says wait because they're going to close the door and you'll get a better photo.
This train had just come down from the hills and was heading to the ports of Santos next.
He said they have bulletproof glass here, and he says it's common that they try to rob the fucking trains.
Watching it roll out, I didn't see any rideable cars. Not one. We did, however, see lots of graffiti, so it was nice to know the scene was alive and well here. But my main concern today was rides. The train got up to speed pretty quick. Since my first choice was now void due to being down Gangster Alley, I was gonna have to settle with plan B. That meant catching trains on the other side of the yard as they came out. This meant catching on the fly. And if all the trains got up to speed this fast, that wouldn't leave much of a window to actually get on, let alone with 3 people. So far, things were not going in my favor. We walked around the bend and up into the hills to where I was hoping to catch out from. At least their signs are a little more creative out here. There was a lot of cover along the tracks, which was nice, and the trail took us right up to the tracks. This place brought a whole new meaning to the hobo jungle. With more workers doing their thing and not caring we were there, it was a bit of a relief. That's always a pretty big hurdle to overcome. But even at that, I'm basically only 1 in 4 so far. We continued up the tracks and I carefully inspected each car as we walked by. I didn't see a lot of rideable cars. Actually, none to be honest, which made me worry a little bit. We only had an hour before our ride left, and I was praying we'd at least see one train with good rides on it before then. I was still holding out hope for empty iron ore trains making their way back to the mines. I just needed to see at least one to know it was doable. By now the sun was bearing down on us and even the animals were looking for shelter.
What is back to
Of course, we couldn't resist leaving our mark. Nonetheless, we pressed on as the tracks winded their way into the hills. It didn't take long to work our way up towards the front of the train where we found 2 sexy idling units. Mac took the task of climbing up and seeing if it was manned. Yeah, I guess so.
Sleeping?
The guy in there is asleep.
Just one guy?
Sleeping on the job.
So we kept on walking up the tracks a bit further to get a lay of the land. Watching another port-bound freight pass, and with time running out before our evacuation, I wasn't happy with what I was seeing so far. If I was alone and needed a ride, it was one thing. But with me, Mac, and Bandita on a ride like this, and catching out on the fly, this was not good. It actually wasn't realistic at all. The trains weren't even as long as I would have hoped either, which meant even less options for something safe. The only plus so far was the one thing I can work around. I can handle prying eyes as it's the norm, but no safe rides basically means no ride. So far, things were looking bleak. With time running out, and us not wanting to miss our ride to safety, we decided to head back towards the yard.
Here we go? Yeah.
As we passed the units, Mr. Conductor was now awake and popping his head out to say hey. Mac chatted him up a bit and then asked if we could come in. The guy said yes.
Tem que ser rapidinho para o chefe não brigar.
Rapidinho, chefe. Não faltas de você.
Não, minha não, pô. Vocês aí, pô.
Ah, cool.
É tranquilo?
Muito bem. Não mexe aí, você não solta o freio, hein?
Você vai fazer para mais 2, Lucas. Pouca periga, né?
É, porque tem que ter EPI.
We toured the local and chatted him up for as much intel as we could before getting
Se vocês forem
booted.
pedir lá embaixo, eles deixam. Eles têm que ser de capacete e tudo. Bota.
Muito perigo.
Só chegar com eles lá que eles deixam, pô.
Muito obrigado.
Falou, falou.
Ei. Tchau.
The one thing I noticed in all this was that they only had one guy running the train. This was interesting.
These lights are hot. Oh yeah, dude. What do you think of that, Sean? Cool, eh? I go, it's dangerous around here. He goes, yeah. He goes, you need shoes and a hard hat. Oh. So we just have to wait till an iron ore one comes and we can hop in the bucket, Sean.
Yeah, but how many of those are going to come? Because how many have you seen today?
None.
We'll see, man. We'll play it by ear.
When he comes, I'll ask him what the frequency of the iron ore trains is. How about that?
Yeah.
Frequency.
Say we want to take pictures of them. We're thinking of coming on a certain day, like not tomorrow, but
Yeah,
tomorrow.
I'll say we saw all the types of trains we wanted to see except the iron ore trains.
Yeah.
So when do those come?
That works.
As we walked back to the yard, the train did a little work and I wrestled with the idea of Bandita coming. She had had a hard time with near-death experiences and catching on the fly in the past, so it weighed heavy on my mind. Here's a quick side story for you. Back in 07, we were riding IM out of Halifax with a good friend, Atherton. We got a bit out of hand drinking and I guess we'd been spotted. As an hour outside of the city, the train stopped and the RCMP came looking for us.
Pushing it back into the yard. Yeah.
We hid in the woods and easily missed getting caught. But when the train blew its whistle, we didn't have very long before it was moving. We climbed up the hill racing to the tracks, and by the time we reached the train, it was already at running speed. Atherton jumped on first. Running behind him, I then jumped on, and as I was climbing up, I looked to see Bandita trying to get to the ladder, but the train was now going too fast. We both grabbed her hands and tried to pull her up. With Atherton in the well and me on the ladder, we didn't have a good enough angle to hoist her up properly. By now, her feet were dragging in the stones and we just couldn't get her in. Tiring, she finally let go and fell to the side. I quickly jumped off backwards and wiped out pretty good. There was Atherton looking over the side of the train as it rolled away from us. I yelled for him to just keep going as he was hopping off the next crew change anyhow. As the last cars rolled by us, I could see the cops walking up the tracks. The cops took our names but let us off. They thought people would stop hopping trains back in the 70s, so they found it kind of a novel idea. We then hitched back to Halifax and got another train out that night, but we spent the next 20 hours in the pouring rain. What a hell tour that was. So as I went through all the scenarios in my head, I wasn't too happy with the possibilities. If she couldn't make it on, she would be left in a dangerous place alone, which meant I wasn't going either. But with the days on this trip counting down, I didn't really have any other days left to catch out either. I also had visions of the three of us riding something like this. It just wasn't safe for her any way I looked at it. I wouldn't be able to live with myself if anything happened to her, especially on my watch. All that to say, it was a tight spot.
I think we got another train coming this way.
Awesome.
Walking back to the yard, I was happy to see it was busy as ever. Only I still hadn't seen one good ride, or any iron trains. I thought this country was supposed to be crawling with rocks.
That's gross.
Waiting at the office, we were greeted by a one-eyed dog.
Over here. Ugh. It smells. Poor thing. Wonder how it happened.
We watched some work getting done in the yard, and before long we were on our way back to town. The drive back was nice, especially as my ass was getting pretty chafed already, and I probably wouldn't have survived another 10K walk. My thoughts now were mostly on coming back. I wondered if gangsters were early birds, and I figured early in the morning would be the safest bet. If we could get past the red zone before anyone was awake, that would be best. It would also give us a full day to catch out. Telling Bandita she couldn't come didn't go too well, and it looked like the ride wasn't going to happen at all for a bit. To make matters worse, we missed leaving the original day I'd planned because we all got food poisoning. Taking it one step further, it looked like we missed our window for good weather at the same time. The night before our new catch-out date, a major storm blew in. Either way, I'm getting on a train. Hell or high fucking water, this is happening. When astronomers first began searching for the possibility of black holes, they realized that one of the best chances of discovering one would be to look at the center of our galaxy. However, they had a hard time seeing because stars are 100 times denser in the center than they are out here around our own sun. Throw in the vast clouds of gas and dust which prevent visible light from getting through to us, and finding what was hidden beyond was pretty much impossible. In developing new technologies, astronomers learned how to see using different wavelengths of light. This allowed them to see things invisible to our naked eyes. These wavelengths also made it through the dust clouds, allowing us to see beyond. That shift in how we looked at something changed everything. Check this out. Cygnus A is a galaxy about 650 million light years away from us. When looking at it with visible light, it looks ordinary. It's tens of thousands of light years across, very similar to our own. It's messy and not that special. But when we look at it in different wavelengths, like radio waves, it transforms into something else entirely. What you're seeing is a massive structure spread across intergalactic space, 500,000 light years across, linked together by a thread of light leading towards a tiny bright point at the center of the galaxy. How much of our universe lies right before us which we're blind to because we haven't learned to look at it the right way? Everything you know about your life could hinge on one discovery. You just need to look at things a bit differently. Nothing in the universe has changed, just your ability to see it in a new light. And that is everything.
We now know this light is produced by the rotating disk of matter, spinning round the edge of the black hole at the heart of the Cygnus A galaxy, waiting to be devoured. It means that, against all popular expectations, the brightest sources of light in the universe are actually black holes.
Back on Earth, I was just glad to be out of the rain. After my last two encounters with nature, I decided on sticking and rolling aimlessly for a bit. It seemed like I wasn't allowed to see what lay beyond the tracks anyhow, as every time I landed in hopes of exploration, something kept me from venturing further. So the idea now was to just keep moving. Besides, final destinations are overrated.
I had to run like a son of a bitch last night. I let one train pass. It was like a general manifest, didn't really have anything rideable. But I could see that there was thunder and lightning coming in the distance. And I was worried about getting caught outside in the rain, so I was going to try my best to catch DPU. But I was worried if I waited around the middle of the train and there was only a rear one, I might not be able to get back there in time before it left. So I decided to wait in between the middle of the train and the back of the train. That way, if there was a middle one, at least I would know it was there and I could run towards it. And if the train left before I was ready, I'd just hop on knowing that eventually I'd be dry. And if it ended up only being a rear DPU, then I'd be closer to the back and I'd make it. It turned out I'm in the middle, so I had a bit of running to do, and after all the smoking that I've been doing yesterday, it was quite difficult. But here we are.
Despite the shitty weather, it was a busy day on the rails, and with a 20-hour ride ahead of me, it helped pass the time. Of course, I had beans for lunch, and as usual, I didn't have a spoon. But no worries, lids make great ones.
Look at this, can you believe it? $2.49 for one can of beans. The lid off. This part. Of course, you don't want to cut your mouth open on the razor sharp edges. So just be careful, but this is about the most basic way you can do it. $2.69. What a crock of shit.
And let's not forget a little dental hygiene with a few good teeth I have
You know
left.
what else they got conned into? It's the only water they had. Look at it. With added oxygen. Light and pure, like light water? Are you fucking kidding me? Oxygen water.
The sun finally came out for good around sunset, which was a welcome sight. My course of action now was to switch lines in 2 crew changes and then just keep riding. For the first few years I rode, I never knew where I was going or where I'd end up. By catching trains in the same places over and over again, I started to notice patterns with where certain trains would take me. After a while, I learned to look for certain clues which helped me identify a train's destination. It all came down to being able to read or ID trains. When train hoppers talk about reading trains, they're talking about looking at what a train consists of in order to determine where it may be going. Being able to do this is no easy task, and it takes experience to nail down, but it's worth it if you're serious. Trains can go to many different locations, sometimes spanning borders. Sections of a train may also get dropped off along the way, so even where you are on a given train can matter. Even trains heading to the same city may not always end up in the same parts. And in big cities, that can be important. Let's have a look at a few examples. Say you're on a train heading to Majestic City. While one train may go to the north and say drop off local traffic, another may go way south to the ports to ship out international traffic. Some trains may not even terminate in a city at all, but may just crew change and keep going. Some trains always break up, and some may go to a few points before their final destination. As you can see, getting on the right train can mean a world of difference, especially if you're looking for an interchange. You can tell a lot by studying what kind of cargo a given train is carrying and understanding the areas you're rolling through. How do you do this? Message wise hop and expect easy answers? Go around looking for mythical cheat sheets? You do it with experience. A lot of trains that look the same at first glance may actually be quite different. Take these 2 trains for example. Leaving 30 minutes apart, they are both heading to the same city. Notice the type of container and check out the logos. Which train do you think is more likely to head to the ports? I think I'll choose this one. Some trains may also carry containers from more than one destination, even in the same city. I know some of us learned that the hard way. Remember, the type of ride you're on will determine where you end up. Take this train for example. Where does grain come from? Is it full or is it empty? Questions like these all lead to clues as to where your train may end up. You can also tell a lot by what's pulling a train. It's a safe bet to assume this train won't go as far as this one, but don't get fooled by the numbers on the locomotives. The trick to learning how to read trains is to ride out from a set location and repeat the process a few times. One can say train hopping is the study of patterns. Make sure to keep track of what happens, and remember, don't get caught. Different companies have different ways of operating, and things change from place to place. So just because I know trains in one area doesn't mean I know trains everywhere. There are many factors that can also affect things, like time of day of the week, and so on. So keep track of what's going on and keep building on it. Even then, things are always changing, and as business and the economy changes, so does the way railroads operate. You need to be current on what's going on in order to keep up with the game. A train hopper with first-hand knowledge is worth their weight in gold, so eat up. But expecting to know all this without putting any time in riding is just plain silly. So, with that, see you on the rails. Have you ever heard of entropy? Entropy is a measure of disorder. It helps us define the difference between past and future. Think of it like a timestamp. Despite there being no actual passage of time, we can use entropy to define a direction. This arrow of time comes from the tendency for the universe to evolve towards ever greater disorder. Entropy states, as with say Brian Greene's book, that if you were to rip out the pages and toss them in the air, there's only one way for the pages to land in perfect order, but millions of ways for the pages to end up out of order. So, it's much more likely that they will always land in a total mess. Everywhere we look, we see entropy, or increasing disorder with the passage of time. Since the Big Bang, our universe has been constantly moving from a state of order to disorder. The Big Bang sent the universe expanding outward, and as a result, it's still expanding today. By knowing the speed of light and how it shifts over distances, we can measure the size or separation between an object in space. When measuring the movements of space, scientists expected to see that the universe's expansion was slowing down and would eventually begin to collapse back in on itself from its own gravity. Instead, to their surprise, they realized it was actually speeding up. Since the light from distant objects can take hundreds of millions or even billions of years to get to us, we are basically looking back in time when we look into space. Much of what you see today may not even exist anymore, or has since moved to somewhere else completely. We can only see as far into space as the amount of time light has had to travel since the Big Bang, the creation of the universe. The farthest we can see as of right now is about 46 billion light years out. Something is still beyond that. We just can't see it, because the universe hasn't existed long enough for the light to make its way to us. Every time we find a way to look further into space, we just keep finding out there's even more beyond. It's as if the more we see, the further the truth gets from our hands. The more we learn, the more there is to learn. It's a never-ending mission. Einstein explained it best. As our circle of knowledge expands, so does the circumference of the darkness surrounding it. The diameter of light never exceeds the shadowy circumference. And, in fact, as we know more, what we don't know grows larger at an ever-increasing rate. It seems like the universe's expansion is mimicking our own spiritual growth. It's as if we're chasing something, but we'll never actually get there. In the far future, all the distant galaxies will have hurtled out of sight, leaving us in utter darkness. And with Entropy and the Arrow of Time working their magic, things will all eventually break down to nothing. So, without any events taking place to mark the Arrow of Time, time itself will almost cease to exist. If there was anywhere I didn't know the trains, it was definitely here in Brazil. They really did look all the same to me, no matter which way I looked at them. Luckily, as with my first experiences riding back home, I didn't overly care where we ended up. The rain seemed to subside, but the wind was still howling at full force the morning of our departure. We packed our bags, said our goodbyes to Bandita, and made our way towards the yard. So this is it. After thousands of miles and months of planning, the day was finally here. The butterflies in my stomach brought me back to all my past adventures. Unsure of how things were going to go, I took solace in the fact that I've felt this way many times before. And in the end of the day, everything's always worked out. I was about to enter unfamiliar territory once again, venturing further into the far reaches of space and time. Drawn in like a moth to a flame, attracted by some invisible force. These are the moments where dreams meet reality, and life truly exists.
Yes. Check it out. A fox followed me to the spot.
In this moment, I may not know what lies ahead, but I know who I am, and that's all I need. We were at the river crossing in no time. The air was hot and humid with the remnants of the past night's storm. The river was full with jungle runoff. Shortly after passing a random set of gray locos, we were at the yard.
I don't know about you, man, but that's a beautiful front.
It is beautiful.
I was excited to see it even busier than the time before. They were filling the units with sand, which was a good sign. Hopefully it meant the train would be leaving our way soon. On our way through, I finally saw gravel cars, which was nice. It gave me a little bit of hope. much as I would have loved to watch this train leave, we had places to be, so we made our way through the yard and up into the hills. Climbing back up the escarpment, we could hear a northbound freight approaching. Don't tell me we're here 5 minutes too late and our train was already leaving. But maybe we could still pull this off. We watched it pass and then crossed over. The whole time I was thinking maybe we could catch it from in between the two trains. Crossing over the other side, I soon realized it was way too narrow, and with our backpacks, it was borderline dangerous. Not to mention, all the rides were pretty shitty.
What? Watch your fucking back, dude. Come in on this side. It's gonna catch or something. Alright. Yeah.
As we waited between the trains, I had this nagging fear that this would end up being the only train of the day, which happens back home enough. Workers on the other side of the train saw Mac and thought he was in trouble, so they motioned for him to stay calm. I guess they didn't realize we actually wanted to be here.
The guy over there is genuinely worried about you. Yeah. Just stay calm.
I was a little sketched out by all the attention we were already getting. Back home, this definitely would have been enough to get called in. I only hoped our earlier observations stayed true and no one actually cared about us. Soon after, the train stopped and we took the opportunity to cross over. Maybe now's the time to find a ride, so we quickly booted up towards the front of the train. It was hot as fuck by now, and despite the weather forecast, the skies were clear and the sun was raging. The train then began to back up, eventually backing up right past us. Okay, it's still doing some work. We may have time. Next thing I know, once again the train was moving forward. Was it leaving this time, or just doing more work? As the lead unit crept up to us, I quickly weighed our options. There was a second DPU, which would be a sweet ride, but it was right behind the main unit, and with broad daylight, it was a bit of a risk. The other option was to ride a suicide porch, which was definitely riskier, and kind of stupid to be fair. Or I could wait and see what the next train was, but what if this was the last one of the day? With no viable options, it was all bad. Then I thought back to earlier when there was only one worker running the train. If he's alone and operating from the other side, maybe he won't see us getting on from this side. I couldn't be 100% sure on it at this point, but I didn't have much time to pine it over. So, with only a few seconds to go, I decided, fuck it, we're riding that unit. This is what train hopping is all about. Gut instinct and last minute decisions. Let's just hope it was the right one. Then, just as soon as we got on, the train stopped. Shit. Are we busted already? Was the train actually getting taken apart bit by bit in the yard? What if we rolled past those guys working on the side of the tracks? Should we get off or should we stay on? All the usual thoughts filled my head. Going through it all, the best option seemed to just stick with it and see what happens. If it was about to leave, we were in the best spot. If it was going to back up past those guys, we could just jump off right beforehand. Soon after, we stopped and then began to move forward once again. This time, for good. We slowly began creeping our way up into the hills and away from Praia Grande. We made it, and in record time. There was more civilization along the tracks than I expected, which made me a little nervous, as at this speed, it would be easy to spot us. On the way up, we passed many trains heading down to the ports. There definitely wasn't any shortage of trains here. My main concern now turned towards the tunnels. Sure, I did my research, but what if I missed something? What if one of the tunnels was too long? Or what if they stopped in the middle of one? I figured we had the best chance for fresh air right here in the front. But at the same time, the exhaust was right on us. And some of these tunnels were long. Whenever going through tunnels, we covered up as best we could, but I couldn't help but think how bad this would be if I miscalculated. As we worked our way into the mountains, the jungle would open up from time to time, giving us an amazing view of Praia Grande and the valley below. The train never really seemed to pick up much speed, so as we passed locations with workers, and there sure seemed to be a lot, it was getting harder and harder to stay out of sight. It didn't help that we had no view of what was upcoming either. Nice, some rolled over rolling stock. As we got further into the hills, our train picked up speed and the scenery turned from flat plains and cityscapes to vast hillsides and breathtaking wilderness. This line was literally carved out of the jungle. As we worked our way inland, we crossed over bridges and passed countless waterfalls. I couldn't help but think how much it would suck to have to trek through the terrain here. We also passed a lot of turned over rolling stock. It seemed to happen a lot. I could only imagine the carnage of riding one of these if they lost control. Thank God we were going uphill. We passed a lot of crew, and no one seemed to notice us, until we passed these guys. We did the old wave test, and they waved back. This was getting really awkward, and sketchier by the second. After passing a huge working crew, it was clear we had to get into the unit and out of sight soon. The conductor was on the same side as the walkway to the cab, so the second the train made a left turn, we'd have to make our move. I went up quickly just to make sure it was empty, which it was. So we then beelined it for the safety of the cab. Coming in, I was surprised to see it gutted, but I was happy to have more room to relax in, while also staying away from prying eyes.
Everybody thought there. Oh well. Yeah. Oh, there's like a little closet to hide in. So Mac, do you think that's gonna be? Do you think we're busted now? I think could be. Hey, we've been through this before. Yeah. We've gotten busted in a unit before, so I think at this point we're moving, so yeah.
This unit was completely stripped and was clearly just used as a helper. Sure, it was a bit hot, but being out of sight was worth it.
I wish we got in here right away. That would have been better. Yeah. We got seen by about, I don't know, 50 employees, maybe. 50. Well, man, if they don't call us in, then nobody will. Yeah.
Ah, I almost forgot. Some of you may have noticed my new toy. With the extra cash I made this past summer, and with us venturing in the jungle and all, I figured why not splurge on a satellite GPS system? It'd be a great way to keep tabs on where we're at. I ended up grabbing the Garmin 62 ST. It cost me about $500 and it came with all the North American maps already. But I had to fork out another $85 for the Brazil maps. It also came with a program called Basecamp, which lets you go over all the data collected. This thing was a pain in the ass to set up. Like a real fucking pain in the ass. But once working, it's been pretty cool. When we first arrived in Rio, it wasn't finding any satellites and I was worried I just blew $600 for nothing. Turns out you just need to let it sit in the open for about 30 minutes and it will readjust to your new part of the globe. It was insanely accurate, down to the inch. Much better than, say, Google Maps on the cell. Although Google Maps is free, it only works where you have a signal. And I think it's safe to assume a lot of the places here didn't. Our train then slowed to a stop, where it sat for a good 20 minutes before a southbound rolled by. I shit you not, within 20 minutes of entering the cab, the sunny skies turned gray and it began to rain. Boy, did it ever fucking rain. I thought about being stuck somewhere further back and us getting soaked to shit. We both were definitely glad we went for this unit. The rain at least brought a bit of coolness to this oven of a cab. So, as it rained, we kept on climbing further up the hills and passing through more tunnels. We never really picked up much speed and the train seemed to stop a lot. The weird thing was, our train would constantly stop and wait for other trains to pass, even though it was double tracked. As we worked our way up into the mountains, it seemed like every time we'd get started, we'd only get going about 5 or 10 miles ahead, then stop for 20 minutes to an hour, wait for a train to pass, and then start again. So we sat back and made the best of it.
Eu sou assim, quem quiser gostar de mim sou assim. Eu sou assim, quem quiser gostar de mim sou assim. Meu mundo é hoje, não existe amanhã pra mim. E sou assim, assim morrerei um dia. Não levarei arrependimentos, nem o peso da hipocrisia. Eu sou assim, quem quiser gostar de mim, sou assim. Eu sou assim, quem quiser.
The scenery was amazing, but there was a lot of trains, and we seemed to spend more time stopped and waiting than actually riding. After 2 hours of being on that train, we both had seen enough trains to last us the next 10 years.
Assim morrerei um dia, não levarei arrependimentos.
As the sun began to set, we finally made it over the mountains and further inland where the scenery changed drastically. Up here, the vegetation seemed to resemble Canada more than anything. The lush jungle and hills were now replaced by pine forests and fields. We passed a few cool ghost towns along the way, and although the scenery was amazing, this constant stopping was really getting to us. It seemed like these lines were so fucking congested, the trains were literally crawling.
Marco a 200 metros, puxe até Marco.
What does it say?
I guess there's some sort of mark at 200 meters or something. I don't know what that word is.
It was cool that there were a million trains you could choose from, but fuck, if they were all moving at this pace throughout the country, I couldn't imagine having to go for a few thousand miles. We got on this train in the morning, and with the sun setting, we barely made it 200 kilometers. Mind you, a lot of that was uphill, but even now that we're on level ground, and the line is going straight ahead for as far as we can see, the trains are still stopping every fucking 10 to 20 minutes. It's safe to say we were both losing our marbles.
Sou assim.
With no mile postings or road markers to keep me up to date, my GPS really came in handy. It had been keeping track of our progress, as well as keeping me updated on how far it was to the next crew change. So despite being a new territory, I was more than aware of our surroundings. But alas, as usual, I didn't put in fresh batteries before leaving. And it was choosing now to get low. Let's just hope it lasts long enough to get us home. As night fell, we sat at yet another train stop and contemplated our exit. No wonder train hopping isn't a huge thing here. You can almost get places faster by walking. So what's the point?
Yeah, I'm fucking sick of these fucking stops.
Yeah, they're ridiculous.
It's like a little sick.
Losing your mind.
This is interesting system, that's all I can say. I don't get it. Because there's double tracks, but...
We were pretty close to the official crew change anyhow, so we agreed to get off at the next stop, wherever the fuck that was. I almost felt like I could have had the same experience sitting in some rusted out abandoned train for 8 hours. Thank God I wasn't actually trying to ride all the way up north as I had originally hoped. So once the train was moving again, we had a smoke and enjoyed the next 5 minutes before the train would probably stop again. Looking out at the neighborhoods, I was a little sketched out about where we may end up, but I was glad we were at least rolling through a lot of this. It all looked pretty rough, especially with us showing up late at night. That's when this happened. A black car started pacing our train, and then the next thing we know, they're shining their lights right at us. There was no mistaking someone knew we were on the train. The car then raced up ahead, and I watched it hoping it would just turn off, but it didn't. It just didn't feel right. So I told Mac we need to get ready to bail. We packed up and the train began to slow. All the while, the black car was still pacing us up ahead. We talked about the possibility of cops coming, and my mind raced with thoughts of armed military police busting into the train. My original plan of playing stupid with the police didn't seem so easy anymore. I put away my camera and waited by the front door for the right time. Up ahead, the car then crossed over the tracks to the right of the train and stopped. At the same time our train reached that intersection, it slowed almost to a stop, eventually stopping. Bam! Right at that second, they threw on the unit reverser lights and our cab lit up like some UFO encounter. There was no denying they knew it was us now. Now, I yelled as we fucking booked it. I don't even think my feet even touched the steps. Those once sketchy ass neighborhoods now looked inviting as hell. Running is the ultimate guilty admission, so it was all or nothing now. As we ran, I was expecting the black car to come around the corner at any second and take us down. We ran up and over, crossing the path of a wild dog, which almost took chase after us as we passed. I'm sure we looked like prey, all wild-eyed and panicked. We were hoping to find a bus stop away from the scene of the crime, but had no clue where to go. So we took a second to talk to a few locals who were in the process of shutting down the shop. Just before they closed the gate, Matt convinced them to let us in to buy a few things. With the front gate of the store half rolled down, we were hidden from the street, so we took our time and chatted them up for as long as we could, hoping the heat would die down. We saw the black car roll by moments later and I couldn't believe the timing. It felt like something out of a movie. They then went on to tell us that the bus stop was actually on the main road, right where the fucking train was stopped. Right where we jumped off and where we were trying to get away from. Unbelievable. We were gonna have to walk back to the scene of the crime in order to catch a bus out of there. And there was only one more bus for the night, which of course was scheduled to roll through in 10 minutes. Talk about tense. We had no choice but to suck it up and take our chances. We stuck out like sore thumbs, and I really would have had a hard time making up a story about how we were here, or even how we got there, as we knew fuck all about this place.
Well, we got on a bus and made it out of the city without incident. And thanks to Sao Paulo's amazing bus system, we were actually able to take city buses all the way back to Praia Grande. And you wouldn't be surprised to hear it was a fuck of a lot faster than the freight. We ended up spending another day by the beach because we had the place paid for a couple days, but the weather was absolute shit, and to be honest, all three of us were dying to get back to Rio. Once back in the city, unfortunately Mac had to leave for one of his conquests in Belo Horizonte, and he wouldn't be back before we left, so we said our goodbyes. I thought about when I may see him again, as when you have friends that are spread over such vast distances, you never know if it may be the last.
Me and Bandita spent the next week enjoying Rio, and before we knew it, we were boarding a plane back to Canada. On the flight back, I thought about how grueling it would have been to actually cross all of Brazil at a snail's pace by freight. It took us almost 12 hours to cover a 40th of the total distance up to São Luís. And that's not even including the line I want to ride into the Carajás jungle. Which, if you guys wanted a tale of how governments and corporations are destroying lives, that's a great one. I really wish I could have made it so I could have showed you guys.
Brazil had been a great experience, even with the trip being cut short. But to be honest, I couldn't see myself living in a place with such a constant and underlying threat of violence, real or imagined. I mean, Brazilian culture was great. Everything about it was great, especially the acai berry smoothies. And the people of Brazil deserve a lot more from their governments. Surprise. And I honestly hope they get it one day, because Brazilian people are some of the greatest, most spirited souls I've met to date.
Back home, I'd been rolling around aimlessly. Sometimes in circles, other times I'd ride the same line back and forth. It wasn't about the destination anymore, but movement for the sheer sake of movement. For some reason, I was still only eating beans. Honestly, I look over my footage sometimes, and I'm like, why? Summer changed to fall, and then from fall to winter. From time to time, the odd film job would come up, but when I wasn't working, I roamed, branching out into the empty spaces wherever they could be found. The seasons help create the illusion of time passing, but by now I've come to realize it's not even worth following. All I know is my body is falling apart more and more with each passing winter. My teeth are wasting away, my joints are always sore, and I'm getting tired much easier. If time does go on forever, this vessel definitely does not.
The only thing that seems eternal are these rails. It seems like they represent how I'm frozen in time and how I have a set path towards a given destination, whatever that may be. I mean, guys, are we fools to think we actually have free will?
If we are frozen in time, I can at least take some solace in knowing that even after the train stopped running, my adventures will live on for eternity. If I die tomorrow and my soul is destined to take up a set place in time, I can look back and say I'd be happy with what I've experienced, and could easily relive it for eternity.
But I began to feel like all this searching is meaningless. I mean, at the end of the day, motion, like time, is probably just an illusion. I have a feeling that none of this is even actually real, and to be honest, it is a bit scary. And I have a feeling I'm trying to ignore that reality with this constant movement. It's kind of funny what we do as humans to try and ignore the fact that we exist. Drugs, alcohol, masochistic lifestyles. It's like we're searching for the darkness, but we're afraid of it. I mean, even myself, I feel like I'm going towards the darkness and searching it out, but in reality, I don't know if I'm actually looking for it or running away from it.
But until that realization comes to fruition, like Voyager 1, I will continue to spread my soul out over the vast empty spaces in hopes of finally finding out what lies beyond that final bend.
Well, sounds like my ride's here, and to be honest, I've been rambling anyhow, so we'll leave it at that. But the company's been great. Thanks for hanging out. And just remember to put the fire out before you leave.
How long has this soul searched, and all this light has shown me is more darkness. As we roll by, it fools us into believing anything exists at all. But once we pass, everything always goes back to complete black. Now all I want is to return to the darkness from whence I came, but this ride won't stop. For in this life, there are some doorways you may cross through, in which you can never go back. Calling out like a siren, its haunting whistle lures men towards their date with destiny. This train is a collector of souls. This line, an event horizon. I am but a passenger on this voyage, but even the ghosts who drive this train follow rails set before their time. We are all ghosts. We are frozen. We are destined. Death is life's greatest creation, its only destination. Our time here is limited, but it lasts an eternity. We are already dead, but together, brother, we'll live forever. For here we roll eternal. And everything goes back to complete black.
Vem Magalenha Rojão, traz a lenha pro fogão, vem fazer armação. Hoje é um dia de sol, alegria de coió, é curtir o verão.
Vem Magalenha Rojão, traz a lenha pro fogão, vem fazer armação. Hoje é um dia de sol, alegria de coió, é curtir o verão.
Dê, 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 dê.